Once upon a time, in a vast kingdom surrounded by golden fields and silent mountains, there ruled a young king who believed power was stronger than patience. King David was known for his sharp decisions and unpredictable temper. People respected him, but deep inside, many feared the sudden storms of his anger. Among the kingdom's most trusted advisors was an old man named Edward, who had served the royal family since David was a child. Edward was wise, gentle, and patient. He believed that problems were not always solved by force but by calm thinking. One year, the kingdom faced a terrible food shortage. Crops were failing, and villagers were worried about survival. The king asked Edward to predict the weather, hoping for good news. But Edward's forecast turned wrong. Storms destroyed many fields, and people suffered. The king's heart filled with anger. Without thinking, he stood in the royal hall and declared that Edward had betrayed the kingdom through careless judgment. Despite Edward's lifelong service, the king ordered him to leave the palace forever. Edward bowed silently. His eyes carried sadness, but no complaint left his lips. He gathered his simple belongings and walked away from the palace gates, disappearing into the distant hills where life was quiet and humble. Time passed. The kingdom continued struggling with problems that required wise guidance. The king soon realized that ruling alone was harder than he imagined. Decisions felt heavier every day. In moments of silence, he remembered Edward's soft voice explaining that anger was like a burning candle, bright but dangerous if left uncontrolled. Regret slowly grew inside the king's heart. One night he ordered his soldiers to search for Edward, but the old man was nowhere to be found. Then an unusual idea came to the king's mind. He sent a letter to every village in the kingdom along with a clay jar. The message inside the letter said that each village must fill the jar with wisdom and return it within 1 month. If they failed, they must fill it with precious jewels. The villagers were confused. They whispered to each other, wondering how wisdom could ever be placed inside a jar. In one distant village lived Edward. He had chosen the life of a farmer, growing vegetables and helping villagers solve daily problems. When the village leader showed him the king's strange request, Edward only smiled quietly. "Wisdom cannot be poured like water," Edward said. "But sometimes wisdom grows slowly." He asked the villagers to trust him. Near his small wooden house, Edward noticed a young pumpkin vine growing beside the field. Carefully, he placed a small pumpkin inside the jar without cutting it from the vine. Then every day he watered the plant. Weeks passed. The pumpkin grew slowly but steadily. The jar became tightly filled as the pumpkin expanded inside it. When the month ended, Edward cut the vine and sent the jar back to the kingdom. The king received the jar and opened it. Inside was a large, perfectly grown pumpkin, filling the entire space. The king remained silent for a long moment. Then he understood. Wisdom was not something that could be forced into a container. It grew with patience, care, and time, just like the pumpkin. The king realized that his anger had pushed away the person who truly guided him. Without wasting another day, King David prepared his horse and left the palace alone. He rode toward the distant village, carrying only one message in his heart: an apology. In the quiet village, Edward was waiting. When the king finally stood before him, he lowered his head and said, "Forgive me. I made a decision in anger." Edward simply replied, "A wise king is not one who never makes mistakes, but one who learns from them." The king smiled, feeling the weight in his heart slowly disappear. From that day, the king promised himself that no decision would be made in anger, because patience builds wisdom, and wisdom protects a kingdom.